Hello.
Our story begins inside the Millennium Falcon over Jakku. Rey and Finn ran to each other, and they were overjoyed with their performance. After Rey almost slammed the Falcon into the ground and Finn missed his first few shots, the two of them locked in and were able to save each other. Rey admitted very quickly, in the midst of their praise for each other, that she'd flown before, but never left the planet. The two of them were introduced to each other by themselves, learning their respective names. What they didn't understand was how the Force connected them in this moment. They were two, both far from each other at each of their births, and now, bonded in one moment, they had a chance to change the galaxy for the better. Of course, for both of them, the Force had never been anything but a feeling. Finn's connection to the Force had been repressed due to being a part of the First Order. Of course, this wasn't his choice, but it was a consequence of being captured and forced into service for their evil regime. The First Order was like the Empire, and it would kill him if he ever showed signs. But the truth is, they never did midichlorian tests. There was never a need to, especially after the whole Gideon debacle about 2 decades before. Rey was similar in this, but she never had a reason to hide it. When she was 5, she knew they were on the run from something, but didn't know what. They narrowly missed a chance to be saved by Luke Skywalker and Lando Calrissian, but they never knew of that. She felt pulls to an island surrounded by an ocean, in a tug, but never knew what it meant. The Force was strong with both of them, and their bond was one not seen in generations. Before the two of them could really go any further, there was an issue with the Falcon, one that they needed to fix right now. Following their initial bond on the Falcon, they had a series of events that forced the bond they didn't know about to the back of their focus. These events included getting captured by Han and Chewie, going to Takodana, having Finn almost abandon the Resistance path, Anakin's kyber crystal calling to Rey, and the Battle of Takodana, resulting in Rey being captured by Kylo Ren. While the bond in the Force was connected between the two of them on their first real stressful event with each other, they had a long way to go when it came to understanding the Force. Though something for Rey helped her understand the Force more than she ever would have had it never happened. During her interrogation, she felt helpless, similar to how Poe did earlier inside the same room on the same Star Destroyer. Kylo was using the darkness to probe her mind, pulling pieces of information to understand who she was and what she knew about Skywalker. But there was a sudden twist, an awakening, if you will. Some might even call it the Force Awakens. Rey felt a latch, and without any understanding of what it was, she was drawn to it. She resisted, but it wasn't just that. There was a pull to a darkness. She saw Ben Solo's innermost fears, what he dreaded the thought of the most, and she could see things he had done in his life. Whether it be the galaxy-renowned mind trick, or just simply what it was that he was doing now. The tug and pull between light and dark became one where each of them fiercely fought with each other. From the midst of it, Rey called Ben out, telling him to his face that he was afraid that he would never become as powerful as Darth Vader. Then, no, it was Kylo now. He pulled out. He couldn't. How could she resist? It didn't make sense. But it led to her running, and eventually brought her and Finn back together. Their friendship felt so new, but it was exactly what each of them needed. From alone in the barracks and alone in the desert, they were once again unified. They had to tragically watch an already conflicted Ben Solo kill his father, and then after being shot with a bowcaster, one that within the last 24 hours blew up multiple stormtroopers, chase after them. Crazy stuff. Kylo was both forced into emotional and physical pain, and he couldn't escape it, but he would have his revenge. The three of them met in the forest, and the fight transpired all the same. Though before Finn could be cut across the back, a blaster bolt was fired and Kylo stopped it, giving Finn a chance to try and strike back. As he swung, Kylo nearly got cut, but he blocked the strike and removed Finn's hand, launching the Skywalker saber across the forest. As he turned to find Rey, she vanished from his view. He turned over to pull the lightsaber. As Anakin's grandson, he believed that saber belonged to him, but the kyber crystal that called to Anakin, the one that also called to Luke, did not call to their grandson and nephew. As Rey pulled the lightsaber, she prepared for combat against a weak, tired, and emotionally berated Kylo Ren, but she still was immediately put on a backpedal, using her lightsaber like she used her staff and jabbed forward, but running away as she did. She knew and understood that this was an uphill battle for her. All the while, she forgot about the Force. She forgot about the words told to her by Maz and Han, and then remembered what she felt inside the interrogation room. everything came together in one moment. The Force Awakens. She needed to trust something that she hadn't before. It may have scared her, but it was the one thing she could latch onto in her most desperate moment. A fight just like every single fight she had on Jakku, one between life and death. Her defeat of Kylo came with a split within the planet they stood on. Luckily, she was able to quickly find Finn, who had been trying to find them with a blaster in his remaining hand. Chewie landed the Falcon and brought the two of them inside, as the Resistance triumphed over the First Order. They had to go though. The First Order was coming. As mentioned before the assault on Starkiller, they had a readout of where Dakar was, and were preparing to fire on it. Of course, now, General Hux was deploying a fleet with the Dreadnought-class destroyer so they could wipe out the Resistance. On Dakar, Rey and Finn were tasked with a mission to find Luke Skywalker and bring him back to the fight. Of course, this was done after Finn got his new hand. In the meantime, the Resistance had to be ready for their escape. Luckily for them, after they learned of Starkiller targeting them, Admiral Akbar's flagship, the Raddus, was brought to the planet to evacuate them. The New Republic fleet, like the pre-Clone Wars Republic, kept all of its power centralized, and without a true fear in the First Order, there was no reason to assume they needed their fleets anywhere else, and they paid a costly price for it. When Rey and Finn arrived at Ahch-To, they were hopeful to find the Jedi Master, but instead, they came face to face with someone terrified, an individual that before they arrived prepared to burn down the Jedi Temple. As Finn and Rey ascended the temple island of Ahch-To, they surprised Luke, who didn't even sense them, having been cut off from the Force. When they showed up, he was surprised, but when he saw that lightsaber, he remembered everything he had been running from. Luke didn't take the lightsaber and threw it behind him as he stormed away. The following several hours would be Finn and Rey trying to understand something they didn't fully understand. Luke was struggling terribly with everything that happened before, and the two young, eager minds continued to press him until he eventually caved, teaching them 3 lessons. Luke understood what Yoda may have not, that to teach the Force and to understand it, one needn't be a Jedi, and so that's how he taught these 2 students, that unlike him, wanted to know the secrets of the Force rather than go on the great adventure. While Finn was slower coming around to the Force, due to having to suppress it subconsciously in the First Order, being on Ahch-To was really beneficial. Not only that, but being with the other half of his dyad. Luke imparted 3 important lessons to his students, the last students he ever planned to teach the Force to. He told them, Lesson 1, the Force does not belong to the Jedi. To say that if the Jedi die, the light dies is vanity. The Force is not about lifting rocks. There is no need for structure or tradition. The Force was so much more than one narrow view. Lesson 2, the failure of the Jedi is their hubris, the importance of the past and not blindly following their traditions, a lesson very in tune with that of the previous one. Lesson 3 is the Jedi would do anything for balance. As a fire rages within a camp, Rey and Finn are led to believe that these are raiders coming to attack the caregivers. Luke told them that a Jedi would not interfere because it was the natural balance. The raiders were simply the caretakers having a festival, but Rey and Finn didn't know that, and they charged in. The lesson was, the Resistance needed someone willing to do anything, not a Jedi willing to keep balance. For Finn and Rey, these lessons were a bit jarring, but it was through these lessons that they'd be able to understand that to learn the Force, one didn't need to follow the select lessons of an ancient religion. Luke had seen what the cycle was. He felt responsible, not just the generational cycle from his father and the previous Grand Master, but the almost poetic nature of his nephew and the new Grand Master, which was himself. Despite these lessons, it was Rey who was pulled to darkness. The caves below the island offered her knowledge that she was looking for, and she took it, not finding the secrets within. Finn was sleeping when she left, so when she returned, they were able to have a very deep conversation. They both understood each other. They were searching for belonging in each of their own respective ways, and without ever having a true connection, they finally had it. In a sick way, all Finn, Rey, and Kylo were desperately searching for something. Without the dyad aspect connecting Ben and Rey, there was nothing for him to latch onto. Instead, he tried connecting to a Darth Vader spirit that never ever reached out to him. Snoke knew that his student had become weak, and in a way to force his student further down a dark path, he needed to give Kylo a reason to find his darkest self. All the while, the Resistance was on its last legs, and thanks to General Hux, a broadcast of their final moments was being shown galaxy-wide. Snoke pridefully waited in his throne room, preparing for his next move after the destruction of the Resistance. He was prepared to see the end of their little fight against his new regime. Things didn't exactly go that way though. On Ahch-To, Luke was running around the Temple Island, calling out Rey and Finn's names. The two of them were seated across from each other inside of a hut and speaking about her encounter in the cave. As Luke rushed in, he took a deep breath. He was so glad to see they hadn't left yet. He realized after both Finn and Rey told him that they needed him, that he could be a part of their fight, that he should follow them too. Had Luke seen Ben inside the tent, he would have severed the connection again. But it was both Rey and Finn. He told them what happened that night, but it was his version, the unreliable narrator. While Luke never did outright attack Ben, he did ignite his lightsaber as a reaction to a vision that scared him so badly that he was left to react. Why else would he do it? Luke wouldn't ever hurt his nephew, but Ben by that point was twisted so badly by Snoke that he couldn't delineate between fact or fiction. Luke promised them that they would save the Resistance. Across the Outer Rim, as transports were abandoning the Raddus under Vice Admiral Holdo's commands, the Resistance lived to fight another day. Without Finn or ever meeting Rose inside the same ship, Poe didn't have the motivation to send anyone off to Canto Bight, but luckily, he was able to trust Vice Admiral Holdo, who strategically put the Resistance into a position where they could escape, without anyone inside the Supremacy looking for smaller crafts. The First Order never noticed the Resistance escape to Crate. They'd won. While it was a temporary victory, their real victory wouldn't come for another several hours. The Raddus was on its last legs, and Snoke was broadcasting their victory galaxy-wide, but people had something else to lock onto. Leia noticed the message and she prepared a speech, one final battle cry for her people. As she watched the Raddus turn around and snap forward into the First Order fleet, it exploded, sending a shockwave outwards and detonating most of the fleet and the Supremacy. Snoke, Hux, and Kylo survived, but now they had to know, what happened to the Resistance? Leia answered those questions. She started a message that went out to the galaxy. Leia told them that a brave leader sacrificed herself so that the Resistance could survive. What they saw was the beginning of the end of the First Order. She reminded each of them that their fight might seem dire, but they had won before, and they could do it again, reminding them that they had seen larger foes, and they had conquered those too. She promised that they would not lose everything they fought so hard to preserve. She then sent a message to Snoke, telling him that they could attack their people, they could try and extinguish hope, but there would never again be a regime that preyed off the people in the galaxy. The fire was lit. It was time for the people to rise up. Shortly following this message, a small New Republic fleet from the Outer Rim dropped out of hyperspace. They sent transports down to pick up the Resistance fighters, as the war against the Empire became real. Luke, Rey, Finn, and Chewie arrived shortly before the fleet did, and there was, of course, the reunion between brother and sister, and their very quiet conversation. Leia knew who Rey was. She could sense it. That had always been a gift of hers. As she told Luke on Endor, she always knew they were brother and sister before ever officially knowing. This wasn't much different than that. While Leia recognized the lineage for the girl, it was Luke that realized that Finn and Rey were a dyad in the Force. He sensed it on Ahch-To. Had he known that there was a dyad in the galaxy, he shouldn't or wouldn't, or Leia stopped him. Luke went into exile because he believed that Han and Leia would blame him when he couldn't save his student, but what he didn't realize was that his friends never blamed him. Life gets harder as you get older. It happens in life, and they never wanted Luke to feel responsible for twisting their son. It was Snoke who turned him, never Luke. Luke believed that Ben could be saved, but it couldn't be done through him. Like his master before him, Obi-Wan couldn't be responsible for turning Vader. Someone else had to be the one for Ben's turn. So it was up to Rey and Finn to do it, the scavenger and the traitor. But every moment they wasted, they came closer to Ben's darkest moment. Despite a war taking place for the following year, the biggest focus was on the training of Rey and Finn. It was difficult for Finn, and at one point, Luke and Leia separated them. Because of how attached they became after their Falcon trip, and because there was no instant separation after the fight on Starkiller, Finn latched really heavily onto Rey. There was a necessary time apart that they didn't have, time where Finn could see that there was more in the galaxy than his good friend. It was with Luke that he was able to learn this. In other words, Canto Bight was very necessary for Finn's development into the eventual Resistance General in Rise of Skywalker. Due to the no fight that happened on the Supremacy, Finn still had his demons to fight with Captain Phasma, and without a battle of Crate, there was still unresolved tension for Rey and Kylo. But thanks to brother and sister working in unison, both Rey and Finn were able to resolve their inner conflicts and have their necessary growth following the Holdo maneuver and escape at Crate. Due to the Kyber crystal calling to Rey, she used Anakin's old saber, and Finn used Leia's old blade. Without the time necessary to hunt for Kyber crystals, this would have to suffice. Meanwhile, the Dyad was understanding their true abilities with aid from the original Jedi texts, and a mixed training regimen from Leia and Luke. The darkness was moving though. Snoke had an obsession with the dark side. He never knew he was a creation from Palpatine, but he did know that there were secrets of the Sith he wanted. Despite the failure over Crate, the First Order continued growing in the Outer Rim. This war mainly took place within the confines of the Outer Rim territory, and even some Mid-Rim space. But due to the fact that the Hosnian system was destroyed, it involved the entire galaxy. The people were afraid. The Resistance was giving people hope. There was almost a movement ready to move against the First Order. It was brewing. It just couldn't be stopped from brewing. Kylo was sent to Mustafar, where he would discover the Sith Wayfinder, the one that once belonged to his grandfather. He would use it to guide himself and his master to Exegol, where they would find a disheveled Darth Sidious. The Dark Lord survived, suffocating in the balance created by Anakin and maintained by Luke and Leia, and finally when his creations returned home, he wanted to exploit them. Snoke from his own blood, Ben from his own manipulations. But Snoke had no intentions of doing that. His mastery of the dark arts rivaled that of Palpatine in this crooked and broken state. He tried to defend himself, but there was nothing he could do. Snoke used a collaboration of dark side powers to choke Sidious out of existence. Kylo watched as Snoke told the boy that they now had themselves a true empire. He raised his hands, as Palpatine would've, and from beneath the rocks of the planet rose a Sith fleet. Kylo then saw that Snoke was nothing more than Palpatine. While the Dark Master was grappling with the reality of his existence, he didn't let it plague him. He had all the best quirks to Palpatine's personality, and he'd be remiss if he wasted it away in feeling sorry for himself for being nothing more than a clone of Palpatine. With a full fleet of Zyston-class Star Destroyers, he picked his own personal flagship, and then turned to Kylo and told him that they would split up for now. He would see him in the new galaxy. Snoke stepped away, still sensing the conflict within his student, telling him that the rebels he needed to face to finish his training were waiting for him. They would come to him, and he would have to prove himself by killing them. Finn, Rey, Poe, Chewie, BB-8, and C-3PO went off in the Falcon. They were looking to gather more allies. Because the First Order fleet was moving around in the Outer Rim aimlessly, if they could find it, they could ambush it and win this war. Instead, after traversing from Zar to Rhodia, they found a sect of the First Order on Kijimi. The Final Order was still leaving Exegol. It would take precise planning to do that. Snoke wanted the fleet to split up and drop out over every planet that they could to show the galaxy what true power was. Snoke believed that with the heart of the galaxy in the Hosnian system destroyed, they could achieve victory through a show of strength. While the main group was on Kijimi, Ren's flagship dropped out of hyperspace. Luckily, they were able to inform the sect of the resistance of this attack on the free world. Kylo landed on the planet, following the Force, after a report was made by Captain Phasma that indicated that the rebels he was looking for were here. As Rey and Finn were moving throughout the streets, they stopped. They turned over, and down the alleyway was Kylo Ren. He stood there, towering from a distance. He didn't say a word, just slowly moved forward. From the left, Captain Phasma and a group of stormtroopers marched forward, as the Knights of Ren popped out from around them. Rey, Finn, Poe, and Chewie looked to each other, as the Dyad ignited their lightsabers and stood on opposing sides of the small group. There was seemingly no way out of this. Rey and Finn had an idea, and Chewie was catching a glimpse of what he would do. Within an instant, Finn and Rey moved at their respective opponents, as Chewie shoved 3PO down a corridor and Poe covered their rear, with BB-8 following. Finn slapped his lightsaber forward, clashing with Phasma, who whipped out a pike and blocked it. Rey swung aggressively against Ben, who blocked the strikes. Without any knowledge of who Rey was, there was nothing for him to use against her. He was just ready for this rematch. He was calm and collected, blocking each of the strikes as he tried to fend off her assault. The Knights of Ren moved in surrounding him, and her, as their engagement got more intense. Poe and Chewie were trailed by stormtroopers, as Phasma made it clear to them that this kill was personal for her. Due to all the Jedi training the two had received in the last year of their lives, they were ready for each of their respective encounters. Finn pressed heavily against Phasma as their weapons pushed for control over their fight. Phasma taunted him by referring to him as a flaw in their system, a traitor if you will. He threw his blade forward and knocked her backwards. She used the ground to give her momentum as she struck forward with a pike, nearly landing a hit on his face. In the years following the fall of the Order, the Jedi didn't use such strict lightsaber forms, and Luke and Leia were still trying to work on teaching them concretely to Finn and Rey. Finn blocked Phasma as he shoved her forward, before spinning around and cutting upwards, revealing a piece of her face from behind her armor. No one had ever seen her face before, and now she was going to pay for what she did to all the other troopers he served with. Rey was taunted by the Knights of Ren, which only pushed her to use more of her aggression, something that Kylo had been taught since Crate. He positioned himself around her, lightly defending her strikes, and, as her stamina started to slow, he saw his opportunity. She may have snuck by with a win on Starkiller, but he was actually ready for this fight. Kylo used his crossguard to block his strike, before shoving forward and forcing her backwards. Kylo prepared to finish the fight, and as he did, he felt something, and his eyes turned back. He could see his mother. She was saying something to him. Only he could hear it. As he stopped, Rey, not having sensed this, pulled her blade around and in a last-ditch effort, stabbed him in the abdomen as shock filled his face and he felt his mother become one with the Force. Luke and R2 were by her side when she transcended into the living Force, welcomed in by Ben Kenobi and Yoda, as she did. Luke was heartbroken, and Ben was shocked. The Knights of Ren prepared to move in, all of them in total shock to see how weak the Master of the Knights of Ren had become. Rey stopped in the moment, feeling the shock of the death of Leia, but there was something more. Everything that had been taught to her, about the notion of no one ever being gone, the notion that the Jedi way could bring people back. Rey looked to the knights around her. She had since learned the truth of what happened that night on Ossus, the same night that Ben fell to the dark side. She felt for him. He was deceived by a lie, like his grandfather before him. Palpatine's generational torment of the Skywalkers was evident in Ben. Rey, while not knowing her own grandfather or her own lineage, didn't think it was right to let Ben's death come at her hands. She reached out her hand and placed it on his abdomen, using lessons taught to her by Leia to heal Ben's wound, by simply transferring a little bit of life essence into him. These lessons were taught from not just Leia, but the old Jedi texts. She backed up as she looked at her hand in shock. In the distance, they could hear Phasma slamming into the ground as Finn leapt down from the stairs, bashing his blade against her helmet and killing her instantly. Finn looked up to see the Knights of Ren around Rey, and he called out her name. The Knights were confused. Did they kill Rey? Did they kill Kylo? Did they kill them both? He was clearly the lesser opponent here. That was obviously further from the truth, but none of the Knights knew that their leader was so desperately attached to his mother, and his desire for true and actual belonging was gifted to him once again. Because when Rey healed him, she told him that she would not be his killer. It didn't have to end that way. The Knights turned their attention as Finn stopped on the steps, and the Knights moved in. Rey joined her other half in the Dyad as they beat back the Dark Warriors. Ben was just confused, not understanding what to make of the situation. He could see his Knights fall like it was in slow motion. He grabbed his lightsaber and, getting up without pain in his stomach, ignited it and swung at the Knights, who were losing. Within moments, the Knights were gone, and Ben told them that there was something worse coming than him. He didn't know where his heart lay anymore, and he told them that he wanted to help them, but the galaxy would come to an end. Snoke could feel his students pulled to the light, and so from a galaxy away he released the Final Order fleet on the galaxy. Due to the sheer size of the fleet coming out, they could get ships out of Exegol and across the Outer Rim and Mid-Rim within hours. So while Kylo was trying to resist the pull of being Ben, he was also trying to resist the pull to be Kylo. The Resistance heroes were preparing to warn the galaxy. Thanks to Luke, Lando was on Agen Kloss with the Resistance before Leia died. He wasn't there at the moment of her death, but he was there to support his friends. Rey and Finn contacted them and informed them of the coming fight. Lando told them to get back immediately. When they returned from Kijimi, Lando took Chewie in the Falcon off the planet and towards the core to gather support for their fight against the First Order. Ben was still in Kijimi, and while he was there, he was fighting his inner demons by having a vision of sorts of his father. He wasn't really there, but he was imagining what his father might say if he was still alive, and it pushed Ben to the point he needed to be at. It was the crossroads where he no longer cared about what happened to him. All that mattered was ending the torment for the galaxy, standing for what his mother and father stood for. In the following hours, the galaxy would be under siege, but as a response, the galaxy was prepared. Despite there not being a message from Palpatine, there was a final message from the general who gathered up the fighting force to begin with. Leia recorded one final message to send out, and it reflected one of her earliest inspirations, a message left behind on Ferrix by Marva Karasi Andor. This call to action was the inspiration the galaxy needed to make a move on the final order. Inside the main flagship was Snoke, which was going to Coruscant. To prepare for it, a small resistance force, including the Dyad, moved out to stop it in its tracks. Snoke was like his creator, arrogant, believing that the galaxy would bend immediately. But like the mother of the Chosen One always said, the biggest issue in the galaxy was that people didn't help each other. This was a full completion of that arc. People together, whether they were rivals or friends, planets or systems, rich or poor, they came together as one to rise up and fight this evil regime. As the Final Order destroyers arrived over key locations around the Outer Rim, they met stiff resistance. Before these ships could fire their cannons, they were hit with bombs, torpedoes, or anything else that could be done. There were many sacrifices, because unlike the atmosphere of Exegol, these ships weren't unprotected. They were able to defend themselves, but the people weren't ready to let an evil regime back into their lives. The inspiration of the Holdo maneuver and Leia Organa brought the galaxy back into one final grudge match with the Empire. Because while Palpatine never sent his message, warning the galaxy of his return, it was clear this was an Imperial fleet, one waiting for their glorious return. Lando's warning saved trillions of lives, and because of him, they were able to fight back against the darkness. Leia's message was a fire to push people to fight. Over Coruscant, Snoke's destroyer arrived, and with the help of the Falcon and a number of Y-wing bombers led by Omega, the Dyad was able to sneak aboard. The cannon on the bottom of the ship was disabled by the strike made by Omega Batch. The only reason this was permitted was so that the Dyad could stomp out the darkness once and for all. Luke was not present for this, as he was still grieving the loss of his sister, preparing the burning ritual necessary. Of course, on the other hand, if Kylo or Ben showed up, he didn't want to push him further from the path of righteousness, which is also why Luke stayed away from this encounter. The Dyad arrived at the throne room, where a very unhappy Snoke waited. He dragged them across the throne room floors and electrocuted them. His Praetorian guard stood at attention, as he watched the cannon on his Zyston become disabled. He told the Dyad that they would pay with their lives. As he said that, the last First Order fleet arrived. It was prepared to make sure all of their friends died, and with a dreadnought heading the fleet, led by General Hux, its main cannon primed and shot a blast into the financial district of Coruscant, leveling the old Senate building, Executive building, and Jedi Temple, not to mention killing millions in the process. As Rey and Finn tried to fight the power of Snoke, another lightsaber ignited. It was Ben. He was here to free himself and the galaxy from Snoke and his evil regime. Snoke threw the Dyad to the ground after feeling their power. He realized something right before Kylo entered. He realized that this Dyad could give him more than enough power to be the leader of the regime he wanted to rule. Snoke lowered his hand as the Praetorian Guard went in after Ben, who quickly prepared for combat. Finn and Rey saw their opportunity as they got up and ran at Snoke. He didn't carry weapons, but as a practitioner of the dark arts, he used dark magic to ignite two swords. It was very similar in style to the blades of Talzin. He defended himself adequately, as his young opponent struggled next to him. Finn landed the first cut, as Rey followed up by disarming one of his blades. Outside the throne room, there was an explosion. The attack on Coruscant brought the people together, ready to avoid the subjugation of another empire. The dreadnought was shredded, and at the helm of the explosion was General Poe Dameron with a fleet of MG-100 star fortresses, not to mention a collection of old and new flagships. Inside the throne room, Ben struggled with the Praetorians, as he faced off against all 8 instead of 5. He could see the Dyad forcing their way forward, but Snoke lifted them up and electrocuted them, before tossing them to the side. Ben was horrified, but he saw his opportunity. He slipped between the Praetorians, taking a slit across the chest, a deep cut across the thigh, a punch to the face, but he carried on. He leapt up and Snoke turned, lowering his finger and dropping Kylo to his knees, as he used the force to push Ben's lightsaber up towards his neck. Snoke's other hand waved and the guard stopped. As he was torturing his fallen apprentice by pushing his lightsaber closer and closer to decapitating him, he could feel 2 lightsabers ignite into his back. Snoke turned back and swung, missing Finn and nearly clipping Rey in the face, but they ducked out of the way. Ben's lightsaber was released, and he was let go, as he turned to defend himself from a strike made by the Praetorian Guard. Finn and Rey made sure Snoke was gone, and as they turned over they could see Ben slip to the ground. The Dyad used their power to launch the Praetorians down the reactor shafts in the throne room, as they ran over to Ben, preparing to heal him. He pulled the staff from his stomach and shook his head. He took responsibility for the Hosnian incident. Even though he didn't pull the trigger, he felt responsible. He told them that he didn't want to be saved physically, because they already saved him emotionally. He fell down the dark path, and now he could finally have his peace. He looked to them and thanked them for giving him a chance after everything. As Luke was next to his sister, her body slowly vanished, and with it, a story that began with a son walking away from his home and his mother, ended with a boy returning to his home and his mother in the Force. The Final Order continued and tried to expand, and instead of one battle at one location, it was a galaxy-wide contest for victory. The First Order was destroyed over Coruscant, but the Final Order found its defeat where it all ended for the Empire, at Jakku. Rey and Finn would be able to escape the last Zyston as it exploded around them. It wasn't just a victory for the Force, but the galaxy. It could finally have its peace. While there would never forever be balance, as balance was never eternal nor guaranteed, the Sith were gone, and the Jedi could rebuild again. Luke, despite his previous fears from Ahch-To, decided to return to guide the next generation, working more as an advisor, but nothing more. He would tell them what worked for him and what didn't. At some point he would tell the truth to Rey about her lineage, and she'd be accepting of it, having already found her found family, and being happy with it. Despite Rey and Finn being a dyad, they would never have a romantic connection. Their bond was always strongest as a trio, Rey, Poe, and Finn. They were all great friends, and they remained that way. As the Jedi Order rebuilt, and the New Republic found stability in a galaxy, liberated from the scourge of the Final Order. And that, my friends, is our story. And special thanks to all of our patrons: Benjamin Wells, Ozpin, Angel Dust, Alexandra Reese, The Beginning and End, Django Fat Clone, Nick5098, INTJ Recluse, Ben Ingram, The Big Red Pure Mark, Diamond Constant, Darth Nemesis, Lord Tibbs, CC2024, Galaxy Gaming, Tristan Mandalore, Sir William 1767, Darth Revan, Granity Bane, Laliant, Sky Guy, Penguin, Cullen Rooney, Shark Midori, RJ38, Nick, Michael Erlanger, The Last Jedi, Apollo, Weewa670, Annika Stank Runner, CT7567, Toaster Oven, Oz of Oz, Darth Knox, The Eternal Padawan, Joshua Tam, Johnny DeGuin, Sansa Skeleton, Jedi Sloth, Mr. Yeet Gamer, Lord Cali, Galaxy 66, Mammoth Studios, Anakin003, Lord Draken, Photos Legacy Star Wars, Airbus, Rex the Wolf, The Man 3 First Names, Dark Saint 46, Baron Joshua, and Lord Deadwing. For supporting our channel, smash that like button. Let's talk about the story. Creating the Dyad with Finn and Rey was really fun. I think it's really interesting because I feel like Finn, Rey, and Kylo all are very similar in one way or another. They all are looking for something. Finn finds that something when he goes to Canto Bight. That's why the Canto Bight is so incredibly important for his arc. So that's why I wanted to kind of address that here, is like, if he stuck around with Rey, he would need something to say that there's more in the galaxy, because in Force Awakens, that's his main thing. His main thing is finding Rey. And so, in The Last Jedi, it starts with that, but he goes to Canto Bight and he comes around, he's like, alright, there's more in the galaxy than just this one person. And that's fine, that's okay. That's how he becomes Resistance General. So, I hope you all enjoyed. I had a lot of fun writing this story. I always talk about having fun writing in the different eras, so if you like that, smash the like button. Otherwise, I love you all, spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.